The aircraft is already shaking when it begins. Not from turbulence. Not from weather. Not from anything that the pilots of United Airlines Flight 2247 can detect on their instruments or call in to air traffic control. The trembling in cabin A of this Boeing 737-900ER, cruising at 35,000 feet somewhere over the heartland of America on a 4-hour route from Chicago O'Hare to Los Angeles International, is entirely human in origin. It starts at row 14, spreads like a fever through the pressurized air of a cabin holding 241 passengers, and it has a single, undeniable source. The woman in seat 14B who has just placed both of her manicured hands flat against the aisle-side armrest and announced, loud enough for 3 rows in every direction to hear, that nobody is going anywhere. Her name, as the flight manifest will later confirm, is Diane Mercer. She is 53 years old, a real estate broker from a suburb of Chicago whose LinkedIn profile describes her as a fierce advocate for premium travel experiences. She is wearing a white linen blazer that has not yet acquired a single wrinkle despite the boarding chaos of Terminal C, and she has arranged her oversized Louis Vuitton carry-on in the overhead bin with the precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times and expects the world to arrange itself accordingly. She has the window seat. She has the middle seat, her expensive blazer draped across it like a territorial flag. And she has made it abundantly clear, in the 7 minutes since the seatbelt sign illuminated and the cabin doors sealed shut at the gate, that she intends to manage this row as a private domain. But none of that is the catastrophe unfolding in row 14 right now. The catastrophe is the woman standing in the aisle. Her name is Dr. Amara Osei-Bonsu. She is 38 years old. She is approximately 7.5 months pregnant. Visibly so, her abdomen pressing gently against the soft fabric of a gray maternity blouse. She has been standing in this aisle for 40 seconds, which does not sound like a long time until you are 38 weeks along, carrying extra fluid weight, and your bladder is the approximate size of a walnut under the pressure of a developing human being who has recently discovered that kicking in a particular direction produces interesting results. She is not panicking. She is not crying. She is calm in the specific, precise way that medical professionals learn to be calm under conditions that would reduce other people to rubble. She is simply standing there, holding her lower back with one hand and looking at Diane Mercer with an expression of complete, patient disbelief. Because Diane Mercer has told her that she cannot use the lavatory. Not that the lavatory is occupied. Not that there is a medical emergency requiring the aisle to remain clear. Not that the captain has issued any instruction. Diane Mercer has informed Dr. Amara Osei-Bonsu, in a voice that carries the confidence of someone who has never once been told no and cannot conceive of a universe in which the answer will be different this time, that she does not appreciate passengers stumbling over her in the aisle and disrupting her travel, that the lavatory at the front of the aircraft is for first-class passengers only, and that perhaps the doctor, Diane doesn't know she is a doctor yet, and that distinction is about to become the most important detail in the entire story, should have thought about her situation before choosing a middle economy seat on a commercial flight. The flight attendant at the forward galley, a young man named Marcus who has been working United routes for 4 years and has developed what he internally refers to as his de-escalation face, is already moving. He has seen arguments on flights. He has seen delays, tantrums, medical diversions, a man trying to open an emergency exit at altitude, and once, memorably, a dispute over a bag of pretzels that ended with a federal citation. But something about this particular moment, the visibly pregnant woman, the blocking arm, the absolute certainty on Diane Mercer's face, makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up in a way that tells him this is different. He does not yet know how different. Stay with this moment. Don't look away from it. Because everything that is about to happen in the next 4 hours, the announcements, the intervention, the revelation that will silence an entire cabin, the legal consequences that will follow Diane Mercer off this aircraft and into the public record, everything begins right here, at row 14, at 35,000 feet, with a pregnant woman who needs to use the bathroom, and a woman who has decided that her comfort is more important than anything else on this aircraft, including basic human decency, including federal aviation law, including, as it will turn out, the professional judgment of one of the most respected maternal-fetal medicine specialists in the United States. Diane Mercer has no idea what she has just done. To understand how this flight reached this moment, you need to go back approximately 11 hours, to the private life of Dr. Amara Osebansu on an ordinary Wednesday morning in Chicago, Illinois, where she was already running 40 minutes late because that is simply the condition of being a department head at a major academic medical center while simultaneously being in the third trimester of your first pregnancy. Dr. Osebansu had been with the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Northwestern Medicine for 9 years. She had done her residency at Johns Hopkins, her maternal-fetal medicine fellowship at UCSF, and had returned to the Midwest with a specialization in high-risk pregnancies, a publication record that included 42 peer-reviewed papers, and a reputation among her colleagues as the kind of physician who could look at a clinical situation that was going sideways and identify exactly which variable needed to change. She was the doctor other doctors called when they did not know what to do. She chaired Northwestern's Obstetric Emergency Response Committee. She had, 3 years ago, been appointed to the advisory board of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, where she contributed to the clinical guidelines that govern prenatal care across the country. She was, in other words, among the most qualified people alive to make medical decisions about pregnancy, her own included. The reason she was flying to Los Angeles on this particular Wednesday was professional, a 2-day conference of the Society for Maternal-Fetal Medicine, at which she was scheduled to deliver the keynote address on Thursday morning. She had cleared the travel with her own obstetrician, who happened to be her colleague and close friend, and who had reviewed her latest biophysical profile personally and confirmed that a short commercial flight at this stage of her pregnancy carried no significant risk. They had discussed it carefully, the way 2 high-risk specialists discuss everything carefully, and Dr. Osebansu had been issued the standard medical clearance letter that many airlines request for passengers past 36 weeks. She had that letter in her carry-on bag. This detail will matter. The morning had not been easy. Her regular driver had canceled. She had taken a rideshare that hit construction on the I-90, and she had arrived at O'Hare's Terminal C with 45 minutes to boarding, enough time to check in, clear security, and walk the considerable distance to gate C-18, but not enough time for anything else. She had no time to eat a full meal, settling instead for a granola bar and a bottle of water from the Hudson News near the gate. She had no time to stretch properly. She had no time to do anything except settle into the gate area with her roller bag, pull out her conference notes, and try to mentally prepare for a keynote address that 300 of her most respected peers would attend in less than 24 hours. What she did not have, as the boarding agent scanned her ticket and she walked down the jetway onto Flight 2247, was a first-class ticket. The conference had a standard reimbursement policy for business travel, and the business class seats on this route had been booked when the conference office made her reservation. She had an aisle seat in row 12, which was sufficient, which was fine, which she had been perfectly content with until she reached row 12 and found a man fast asleep horizontally across both the aisle seat and the middle seat with his shoes off, and rather than wake him, because she is that kind of person, the kind who would rather accommodate someone else's need than create a scene, she asked the flight attendant, Marcus, whether another comparable aisle seat might be available. It was row 14, seat 14A, which placed her, by the particular misfortune of aircraft geometry and booking patterns, directly next to Diane Mercer. Diane Mercer had boarded early. She boards early on every flight because she carries a United Mileage Plus Premier Platinum card, which grants her Group 1 boarding access, and she exercises this right with the thoroughness of someone for whom travel priority is not a convenience but a statement about the order of the world. She had settled her carry-on, arranged her items on the tray table, placed her blazer across the middle seat, and was already 2 chapters into a thriller novel when the general boarding groups began their procession down the aisle. She did not look up when Dr. Osebansu asked to squeeze past to reach seat 14A. She did not move her legs. She did not acknowledge in any way the physical reality of a visibly pregnant woman navigating a commercial aircraft aisle with a carry-on bag until Dr. Osebansu said, quietly and without any edge in her voice, "Excuse me, I'm in the window seat." At which point Diane looked up from her novel, looked at the carry-on, looked at the pregnancy and said, "Can you manage? I've just gotten comfortable." Dr. Osebansu managed. She always manages. It is one of her professional qualities and also, in this moment, a characteristic that will be tested with increasing severity over the next 4 hours. She settled into seat 14A. She buckled her belt, which required using the extension that Marcus had quietly provided before she even asked. He had noticed the pregnancy, he had noticed the carry-on, and he had noticed the way the woman in 14B had not moved, and he had filed all of this in the part of his professional memory where he stores information that might become important later. He brought her water without being asked. He noted her seat number on his mental roster with a small, invisible asterisk. The boarding continued. The middle seat between Diane Mercer and Dr. Osei-Bonsu remained conspicuously unoccupied, which Diane treated as a gift from the universe and arranged her novel, her headphones, and her water bottle across the armrests as if the seat had been personally reserved for her belongings by the airline itself. The doors closed. The safety demonstration began. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 7:43 a.m., 11 minutes behind schedule. Diane Mercer said nothing to the woman next to her for the first 90 minutes of the flight. Dr. Osei-Bonsu did not require conversation. She had her conference notes. She had her water. She had the quiet professionalism of someone who has learned, through years of medicine, to rest when rest is available, because rest is never guaranteed, and the body, particularly a pregnant body, must be given every opportunity to conserve what it needs. She drank water steadily, as her obstetrician had recommended for the flight. She ate the small snack she had packed. She reviewed her keynote slides on her iPad with the screen dimmed. And then, at approximately the 90-minute mark, her bladder delivered the message she had been anticipating. She needed to use the lavatory. This is not a complicated thing to need. It is, in fact, the most ordinary human need that exists. It is a need that passengers on commercial aircraft exercise dozens of times per flight without incident, without commentary, without anyone in an adjacent seat believing they have any role to play in whether or not it happens. The lavatory on a Boeing 737-900ER is located at the forward section of the cabin, accessible from any economy seat via the center aisle, and its use is governed by exactly one authority: the flight crew, who may request passengers remain seated during periods of turbulence or specific operational requirements. The seat belt sign was off. The flight was at cruising altitude. The cabin was calm. Dr. Osei-Bonsu unbuckled her belt, placed her iPad in the seat pocket, and began to rise from seat 14A. This required, geometrically, that she exit into the aisle by moving past seat 14B, which required Diane Mercer to do one of two things: either swing her legs to the side to create clearance, or stand and step into the aisle to let the window seat passenger pass. Both of these are standard practices on commercial aircraft. Both of them take approximately 10 seconds. Diane Mercer did neither. She looked up from her novel. She looked at Dr. Osei-Bonsu in the process of rising. She looked at the aisle, and she placed her arm across the gap between her seat and the empty middle seat. Not grabbing, not touching, just placing it there, a human barrier, and said, "Where are you going?" The cabin in that particular zone went very slightly quieter. Dr. Osei-Bonsu said, calmly, that she needed to use the lavatory. Diane Mercer said that the forward lavatory was for business class and first class. This is factually incorrect. There is no such designation on domestic United flights of this class. The forward lavatory serves all passengers, though crew members may manage the queue during service periods. Dr. Osei-Bonsu knows this. Marcus, watching from the galley, knows this. Several of the passengers in rows 12 through 16 who are now quietly paying attention to this exchange know this. But Diane Mercer states it with such absolute certainty that for a brief, surreal moment, the factual landscape of the situation becomes unclear, which is, perhaps, the specific social power of complete confidence in the wrong information. "There's a lavatory in the back," Diane says, turning her attention back to her novel. "You can use that one. Row 14 is located in the forward third of the economy cabin. The rear lavatory is approximately 60 feet of crowded aisle away. For most passengers, this is an inconvenience. For a woman 38 weeks pregnant with compromised bladder capacity, it is a considerably more significant proposition. Dr. Osei-Bonsu calculates this. She also calculates, because she is a physician who calculates everything in terms of clinical significance, that she is not going to allow this particular interaction to derail her medically. She says, still in that same patient, precise voice, "I appreciate the suggestion, but I'd like to use the forward lavatory." Diane Mercer looks up again. Something in her expression shifts, a kind of hardening, a settling into position. "I told you," she says, louder now, Loud enough that the woman in 13C has turned her head. Loud enough that the man in 15A has removed one AirPod. That lavatory is for premium passengers. I am a Premier Platinum member. I've earned certain standards on this aircraft. I don't appreciate other passengers creating disruptions. The word disruptions lands in the cabin air like a stone in still water. Dr. Osebansu looks at her, says nothing. The silence itself is its own kind of statement. Marcus is already at the forward galley entrance. He has covered the distance from the cart service position in roughly 4 seconds because his training and his instincts both told him to move. He says, in his calmest, most professional voice, "Ma'am, is there something I can help with?" Diane Mercer says, "Yes, this passenger is trying to use the business class lavatory, and I was just letting her know that's not appropriate for her ticket class." Marcus says, with the same measured calm, "All lavatories on this aircraft are available to all passengers." "Ma'am," this directed at Dr. Osebansu, "you're absolutely welcome to use the forward lav. It's free right now." Diane Mercer closes her novel. This is the moment. This is the specific moment that everyone within 6 rows will remember for the rest of their lives, because what happens next is the point at which a garden variety entitled passenger interaction transforms into something else entirely. The point at which Diane Mercer makes the kind of decision that cannot be unmade. She says, "I'd like to speak to the head of cabin service. Right now." The head of cabin service on Flight 2247 is Senior Flight Attendant Patricia Ewan, a 22-year veteran of United Airlines who has worked every route the airline flies, managed every category of in-flight situation the human personality can generate, and who responds to demands for her presence with the brisk, unruffled efficiency of someone who long ago stopped being surprised by anything. She arrives at row 14 from the mid-cabin position in under 2 minutes, assessment already running as she walks. She can see Marcus at the galley entrance. She can see the passenger in 14A still standing. She can see the passenger in 14B with the closed novel and the very specific posture of someone preparing to deliver a complaint. Patricia has seen this posture before, many times. She has also never seen it while there is a visibly pregnant woman being prevented from accessing a lavatory. This is a new combination. "What can I do for you?" she asks, directing the question at both passengers simultaneously, which is itself a professional move. It refuses to prejudicate who is the complainant and who is the respondent. Diane Mercer begins. She is organized. She is articulate. She presents her position with the fluency of someone who has filed many customer service complaints in her life, who knows the language of grievance and the specific register that suggests authority even when none exists. She explains that she is a Premier Platinum frequent flyer with over 150,000 miles on United in the current calendar year alone. She explains that she has certain expectations about her travel experience. She explains that the woman next to her, she does not use Dr. Osebansu's name because she has not asked for it, has been climbing over her repeatedly and creating disruptions, and she wants to be moved to a seat where she can travel without interference. Patricia listens to all of this. Then she says, "I understand. The forward lavatory is available to all passengers on this aircraft. That said, are you requesting a seat change?" Diane says yes. Patricia says she'll check availability. But then, and this is the first twist that the passengers in the surrounding rows do not expect, Diane Mercer says something else. She says, "And honestly, should someone in her condition even be flying? Isn't there a policy about that? Isn't that a liability issue for the airline?" The cabin goes very, very quiet. Dr. Osebansu is still standing. She is standing and listening to a woman question her fitness to fly, her physical condition, her right to be on this aircraft, with the particular kind of targeted social violence that comes wrapped in the language of concern but is not concern. It is diminishment dressed up in reasonable tones and directed at a person whose body is being offered as a reason she deserves less consideration, not more. Dr. Osebansu takes one breath. She says, "I have medical clearance for this flight. I'd like to use the lavatory now." Patricia Ewan says, "Of course." She steps back, creating the physical space for Dr. Osebansu to pass. Diane Mercer does not move her legs. Patricia says, with no change in her tone but with something behind her eyes that Marcus has seen before and which means very bad things for whoever is on the receiving end of it, "Ma'am, I need you to allow this passenger to exit the row." The standoff lasts 4 seconds, which at 35,000 feet inside a pressurized aircraft feels significantly longer than 4 seconds on the ground. Then Diane Mercer moves her legs. Dr. Osebansu passes, uses the lavatory, returns to her seat, and in the next 20 minutes, Diane Mercer begins the behavior that will define her permanently in every future account of this flight. She uses the call button 3 times. She complains in increasing detail about the ventilation near row 14. She asks Marcus whether the aircraft has been cleaned recently and whether United maintains hygiene standards adequate for Premier Platinum passengers. She requests a different snack selection than the one being offered. She asks whether there are noise-canceling headphones available for purchase because the ambient cabin sound in economy is, in her assessment, unacceptable. And every time she makes a request, every time she speaks to Marcus or Patricia or the third flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, she does so at a volume that carries to at least 3 rows in every direction and with a specificity of complaint that suggests she is building a record, assembling the materials for a grievance that she intends to file the moment she lands. At row 15, a retired teacher named Gerald is watching all of this with the expression of someone witnessing a natural phenomenon. Not panic, just the specific absorption of a person watching something unfold that they cannot quite believe is real. At row 13, 2 college students heading back to USC are exchanging glances with each other every 30 seconds. At row 12, the man who was originally asleep across Dr. Osebansu's assigned seat has woken up and become aware of the situation through the ambient information field of 6 surrounding rows and is watching Diane Mercer with the focused attention of a person who has arrived late to a film and is trying to determine the genre. It takes 23 minutes for Diane Mercer to escalate from complaints to the threat. She pushes her call button, and when Marcus arrives, she says, "I need this to stop." He asks what she needs to stop. She says, "The disruption. This passenger, again, not a name, never a name, has been disturbing my flight. She's been getting up repeatedly. She's using the lavatory constantly. I want to file a formal disruption complaint." Marcus says he understands and asks if she would like him to bring the complaint form. Diane says she wants the passenger moved. She wants her removed from the vicinity. Marcus says, "I'm afraid I can't move another passenger without cause." Diane says, "I'm giving you cause." Marcus says, "Ma'am, using the lavatory is not cause." Diane says, "Then I want to speak to the pilot." The second twist arrives with the pilot. Captain Robert Huang, who has been flying for United for 18 years, has been monitoring the situation through the communication system that connects the flight deck to the cabin crew on any aircraft. Patricia has kept him updated. He has been assessing whether this rises to the level of a formal in-flight disturbance, which carries its own protocols under FAA regulations. Specifically, the provisions of Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations that govern interference with flight crew and disruptive passenger behavior. He has been talking quietly with his first officer, a woman named Lieutenant Sonia Marsh, about the geography of the situation. He makes an announcement. The intercom chimes, and his voice fills the cabin with the formal authority of someone who is in command of a federal airspace vehicle carrying 241 people and is choosing his words with careful, deliberate precision. He says that all passengers are reminded that federal aviation regulations require compliance with crew member instructions, that the use of aircraft lavatory facilities is available to all passengers regardless of ticket class on domestic flights, and that any behavior that interferes with crew member duties or another passenger's reasonable enjoyment of their flight may be subject to federal citation and law enforcement action upon landing. He does not name a passenger. He does not need to. The entire cabin knows exactly who that announcement is about. Diane Mercer's face, for the first time in this flight, shows something other than certainty. It shows a kind of recalibration, a brief, visible moment of recomputation. But it does not last, because the personality type that builds this kind of behavior over a lifetime does not recalibrate quietly. It escalates. She says, to no one in particular but to everyone within 6 rows. "This is unbelievable. I've never been treated like this. I spend $30,000 a year with this airline. $30,000. And they're protecting someone who shouldn't even be on this plane." The man in 12A turns around and says, quietly but clearly, "Lady, stop." She says, "Excuse me." He says, "I said stop. You're embarrassing yourself." She says she does not believe she was speaking to him. The retired teacher in 15A says, "You kind of were, though. We can all hear you." The USC students in row 13 are no longer exchanging glances. They are watching with the full, unguarded attention of people who have realized they are witnessing something that they will describe in precise detail for years. And at the seat by the window, Dr. Amara Osebansu is sitting very still. She has replaced her iPad in the seat pocket. She is not looking at Diane Mercer. She is looking at the window, and she is breathing in the slow, controlled pattern that she teaches to her patients when they are frightened or in pain and need to find the still center of themselves. But she is also doing something else. She is reaching into her carry-on, which is stored beneath the seat in front of her, and she is retrieving something. A small folder, a business card wallet, and something on official letterhead that crinkles softly as she opens it. Patricia Ewan is already walking back down the aisle. She arrives at row 14. She leans down and speaks very quietly to Dr. Osebansu, who hands her the item on letterhead. Patricia reads it. Her expression does not change, but something behind her eyes does, a kind of recognition, a kind of stillness that comes when a person suddenly understands the full dimensionality of a situation they thought they had already mapped completely. She straightens up. She looks at Diane Mercer. She says, quietly, "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." What Patricia Ewan has just read is the letter Dr. Osebansu carries when she travels for professional engagements. It is a document on Northwestern Medicine letterhead, and it identifies her name, her credentials, her position as Chief of Maternal Fetal Medicine and Vice Chair of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Northwestern Medicine, a member of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists Advisory Board, and a clinical specialist in high-risk pregnancy whose professional judgment on matters of prenatal health is consulted by physicians across the United States. This is who has been sitting in seat 14A. This is who Diane Mercer has been blocking from the lavatory for the past 93 minutes. This is who Diane Mercer told should have considered her situation before getting on a plane. Patricia walks to the forward galley. She speaks to Marcus in a low, rapid exchange of approximately 30 seconds. She speaks via the crew intercom to Captain Huang for approximately 45 seconds. And then she makes her way to the mid-cabin position where the two air marshals assigned to Flight 2247 are seated. Federal air marshals travel on domestic routes without announcement. Their seats are not disclosed. Their presence on any given flight is classified as law enforcement operational information. But they exist on thousands of flights daily in the unremarkable middle of the cabin, and on Flight 2247 they have been watching Diane Mercer for the past 40 minutes with the trained, patient attention of people who are professionally accustomed to waiting for the moment when they need to act. That moment has arrived. Not because of the lavatory, not because of the announcements or the complaints or the volume of Diane Mercer's voice. What tips the scale under FAA regulations is a specific category of behavior that Diane Mercer crossed approximately 20 minutes ago when she suggested to Sarah, the third flight attendant, that if her concerns were not addressed she would make sure Sarah lost her job, and then suggested to Marcus that the airline's legal exposure from having an at-risk passenger on board was significant enough that he should be considering his own position very carefully. That is crew intimidation. Under Title 49 of the United States Code, Section 46504, interfering with or intimidating flight crew members is a federal criminal offense carrying penalties including fines and imprisonment. You do not have to touch anyone. You do not have to be loud. You simply have to make statements that a reasonable person would understand as attempts to interfere with or coerce a crew member's performance of their duties. Diane Mercer has done this twice, clearly, and in front of multiple witnesses. The air marshals stand up. There is a specific quality to the moment when two federal law enforcement agents rise from their seats on a commercial aircraft. It is not dramatic in the cinematic sense. They don't announce themselves, they don't raise their voices, they don't make theatrical gestures. They simply stand, and their posture changes, and the energy in the surrounding rows changes with it, and suddenly every person within visual range understands that something with actual authority has entered the frame. They walk to row 14. The senior marshal, a man in his 40s in a dark blue jacket, whose name is Agent Daniel Reyes, crouches down to the level of seat 14B and speaks to Diane Mercer in a voice so quiet that only she and the two closest rows can hear it. He identifies himself and his partner. He asks Diane Mercer to come with them. Diane Mercer says, "What is happening right now?" Agent Reyes says, "Ma'am, I'll explain everything when we've moved to a private location. I need you to come with me now." Diane Mercer looks around her. She looks at the rows of passengers watching. She looks at Patricia standing at the galley entrance. She looks at Marcus. She looks at Dr. Osebansu, who is sitting completely still, looking at her with an expression that is not triumph, is not anger. It is simply the expression of someone watching a chain of events reach their logical conclusion. The quiet in the cabin at this moment is profound. 241 people in various states of pretending to read, pretending to watch movies, pretending to sleep, are each in their own way holding their breath. Diane Mercer says, "I am a Premier Platinum member." Agent Reyes says, "Ma'am." Just that. Just her title and the tone. She stands up, and the cabin releases a breath, not audibly, not in any way that anyone would later describe as a crowd reaction, but perceptibly, the way pressure releases from a sealed container when the valve finally opens. The woman in 13C puts her hand over her mouth. The retired teacher exhales slowly through his nose. The man in 12A, who told Diane Mercer to stop 20 minutes ago, closes his eyes briefly with the look of someone who has watched the right thing happen and is quietly acknowledging it. Diane Mercer walks up the aisle, flanked by the two air marshals, toward the front of the aircraft. She does not look back. Now comes the moment that this cabin will remember forever. Not the air marshals, not the announcement, not the removal of one passenger from row 14. What will be remembered is what happens next. Patricia Ewan walks back to row 14. She crouches in the aisle beside seat 14A and speaks to Dr. Osebansu for approximately 90 seconds. Then she stands and she turns to face the cabin and she says, not over the intercom, just in the clear, carrying voice of a woman who has been doing this for 22 years and knows how to command a space. "On behalf of the crew of Flight 2247, I'd like to apologize to our passenger in 14A for the discomfort of this journey. She has been unfailingly gracious under circumstances that required no such grace. I'd also like to share, with her permission, that the passenger in question is a distinguished physician who has dedicated her career to the health of mothers and children, and who managed this situation with more dignity than most of us could have in her position." The applause begins in row 13. It moves forward and backward through the cabin with the velocity of something that has been gathering energy for a long time and simply needed a place to go. It is not polite applause, the kind that happens when a plane lands smoothly. It is the kind that happens when an entire group of people who individually witnessed something wrong and individually did not know what to do about it suddenly finds, collectively, that something right has happened instead. Dr. Osebansu nods. She presses her lips together in an expression that is not quite a smile but is adjacent to one. The expression of someone who is moved and is also, characteristically, trying not to make a production of it. Captain Huang's voice comes over the intercom. He does not address the situation directly. He simply says that Flight 2247 is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes from Los Angeles International, that the weather at their destination is clear and 68 degrees, and that he and the crew appreciate the patience and cooperation of their passengers today. There is something in his tone, a deliberateness, a warmth that is not standard captain announcement warmth, that communicates something beyond the words. The cabin settles. Marcus brings Dr. Osebansu a full meal, upgraded from the standard economy service, along with a note that Patricia has handwritten on United Stationery that reads, simply, "Thank you for your patience. The aisle is yours." The woman in 13C, a nurse practitioner from Milwaukee who has been quietly furious for the past hour, turns around and introduces herself to Dr. Osebansu, and the two women spend 20 minutes comparing patient care notes across the seat back in the relaxed, collegial way of medical professionals who have found each other unexpectedly and are grateful for the company. The retired teacher offers Dr. Osebansu his extra granola bar. She accepts it. The USC students ask, via a note passed through row 13, whether she would sign their copy of the in-flight magazine. They do not have it. They have torn a page from a notebook because they want to tell the story and they want a detail that makes it real. She signs it with her title and her hospital's name, and she adds a small note of her own that reads, "Be good to your doctors. We need you too." Diane Mercer does not return to row 14. She is held in the forward section of the aircraft, in the area near the first-class galley, in the company of Agent Reyes and his partner for the remainder of the 2-hour flight. She is informed of the specific federal statutes that govern her behavior. She is informed that her conduct has been documented by the crew, that it has been witnessed by 2 federal air marshals, and that a report will be filed with the Transportation Security Administration and the FAA upon landing. She is informed that United Airlines has been notified of the incident through the crew communication channel and that the airline's customer service and legal departments will be in contact. She is not arrested on the aircraft because federal law enforcement makes this determination based on specific criteria, and because Agent Reyes, who has made this assessment many hundreds of times, has determined that the aircraft is the wrong place for it. The right place is the gate, where there will be backup, documentation, and the full apparatus of due process available. The right place is on the ground. The wheels of Flight 2247 touch the runway at Los Angeles International at 12:47 p.m. local time, which is approximately 4 minutes ahead of the original schedule. Captain Huang, having made up some of the delay in the favorable tailwind over Nevada, which is the kind of detail that seems small and is actually a perfect metaphor for this entire journey, which began in delay and turbulence and arrived, eventually, a few minutes early. As the aircraft taxis to the gate, an announcement asks all passengers to remain seated while certain operational procedures are completed. This is standard language. What it means, in practice, is that the aircraft door will open and law enforcement will board before any passenger deplanes. 3 Los Angeles Airport police officers board the aircraft at Gate 47B of the Tom Bradley International Terminal. They proceed to the forward galley. They confer with Agent Reyes. They escort Diane Mercer off the aircraft. She walks up the jetway with a police officer on each side and Agent Reyes behind her, still carrying her Louis Vuitton bag, which has been retrieved from the overhead bin by a crew member at her request. The linen blazer is still unwrinkled. Everything else about her has changed. The gate area at 47B sees this exit. There are perhaps 60 people waiting for various departures in the surrounding gates, and none of them know the specific story, but all of them understand the general shape of what they are seeing. A woman in expensive clothes being walked by officers off a commercial aircraft, and there is a quality of watching in that gate area that Diane Mercer will remember for a very long time. The full accounting of consequences comes quickly. Within 48 hours, United Airlines has notified Diane Mercer in writing that her Mileage Plus account has been suspended pending investigation, that she has been placed on the airline's enhanced review list, which, while not technically a no-fly list in the federal sense, means that any future United ticket she purchases will trigger a pre-boarding security review, and that the airline reserves the right to refuse carriage. The crew intimidation incident is referred by the FAA to the Department of Justice, which has discretion over whether to pursue federal charges under Title 49. Civil aviation attorneys later assess, publicly, that the case has a strong basis for prosecution given the witness count and documentary evidence. The fine alone under Title 49 Section 46504 can reach $25,000. A colleague of one of the USC students, who is not on the flight but who receives the story via text during the taxi to the gate, posts about it. The post finds the particular digital velocity that comes when a story touches something real, something about fairness and patience and the specific indignity of being made to feel small in a confined space where you cannot leave. By the time the story reaches the general internet, Dr. Osebansu's credentials are known, and the contrast between what she is, one of the most qualified maternal health specialists in the country, and what she was treated as an inconvenience in an aisle generates the kind of collective reaction that reflects something real about how we treat people when we don't know who they are. But here is what matters about that framing, and Dr. Osebansu herself makes this point in a statement she later releases through Northwestern Medicine's communications office. The question of her credentials is not the reason Diane Mercer was wrong. She would have been wrong if the woman in seat 14A had been a store clerk. She would have been wrong if she had been a student, a retiree, a person of any professional standing or none. A pregnant woman needed to use the lavatory on a commercial flight. That is all that was needed for Diane Mercer's behavior to be completely, indefensibly wrong. The credentials are not the justice. The justice is simpler than that. The justice is that the world, specifically the confined, pressurized, inescapable world of a Boeing 737 at cruising altitude, eventually stops accommodating the idea that some people's comfort is more important than other people's basic dignity. United Airlines issues a formal apology to Dr. Osei Bonsu and makes a significant charitable donation in her name to a maternal health nonprofit of her choice. She chooses the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, which advocates for Black maternal health equity in the United States, a cause she has worked on professionally for much of her career. The donation is made public. It is, in the particular mathematics of institutional accountability, not nothing. Patricia Ewan and Marcus both receive formal commendations from United's Operations Division for their handling of the incident. Captain Huang files an after-action report that is used, in the subsequent quarter, in United's crew training program as an example of coordinated passenger management under escalating circumstances. Sarah, the third flight attendant, who was the target of the job threat and who is 26 years old and 3 years into her career, receives a personal message from the airline's VP of in-flight operations that her conduct was exemplary. Dr. Osei Bonsu delivers her keynote address at the Society for Maternal-Fetal Medicine conference the following morning. She arrives at the Los Angeles Convention Center having slept well, having eaten a good dinner, having spoken by video call to her obstetrician, who confirms that the flight and its associated drama produced no clinical concern whatsoever. She stands at a lectern in front of 300 of the most knowledgeable maternal health specialists in the world and delivers a 40-minute address on the clinical management of high-risk pregnancies in underserved populations that receives a standing ovation and is later published in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. She does not mention Flight 2247 in the address. She does not need to. What happened on that flight, and what it revealed about dignity and patience and the particular bravery of people who choose not to escalate when the other option is available to them, is not the story of the keynote address. It is something else. It is a reminder, carried at 35,000 feet above the American heartland, that the way we treat the person next to us, when we don't know who they are, when there's nothing in it for us, when the architecture of the aircraft has made it temporarily possible to pretend that the rules of basic decency don't apply, that treatment is a statement about who we actually are. Not who we claim to be, not what our status level suggests, who we actually are. Diane Mercer got off that plane with her bag and her blazer and her Premier Platinum card, and she left behind, in the cabin of a Boeing 737-900ER still taxiing to its gate in Los Angeles, a residue of something that the 240 people who witnessed it carried with them when they deplaned. Something that looked a lot like the memory of what it feels like to watch the right thing happen. That feeling travels further than any flight. If this story stayed with you, share it, because the next flight has already departed, and somewhere at 35,000 feet right now, the question of who we choose to be in a confined space with people we'll never see again is being answered by someone. The answer deserves an audience. Next time, we're going back to the skies. A flight attendant is accused of assault by a passenger who doesn't know she's filming the whole thing. The footage doesn't show what anyone expected. Stay with us.